Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Retail Corner podcast. I am joined today by Scott Voigt, who is a kind of an expert in retail, and so we're going to be talking about specifically how his company helps us in retail. For those of us a little bit on the outside, Scott, can you kind of talk us about through your CV a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Hello,
How you
guys.
help retailers?
I am Scott Voigt. I'm the CEO of a company called FullStory. FullStory is a behavioral analytics platform that serves lots and lots of retailers, particularly in the e-commerce mechanism.
Okay.
We created a unique way of ingesting and analyzing data on behalf of our e-commerce and retail customers. And so we spend a lot of time with them trying to help them understand behavior.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, with I have a master's in criminology and everything else like that, and so I love the like situational bias and everything else like that'll come through this conversation. But so when you're gathering that behavioral data, you usually you'll look at a behavioral index, you'll look at demographics and everything else like that. Where's your go-to place to gather data?
Well, let's start a little bit with how companies collect data today for the
Right.
most part. So for, I don't know, since the history of e-commerce has been around, the mechanism to actually collect data is the person that owns the website says, I think that this is important, add to cart. That's an important moment. So now I'm going to go get an engineer or some analyst to tag that button click in code so it phones home to one of my analytics systems so I can get some signal. Now, the problem with this is you get a lot of bias because people aren't very good at knowing what's important. And, it's limited because you only measure what you thought was important in the first place. And honestly, there's some concepts that are hard to get at that are more behavioral in nature. And so there's some new approaches out there. FullStory happens to have one where you collect all of the data by default. And by doing that, you can actually start to understand some of the behavior. So that's the new trend that we're seeing out there right now is understanding not just a couple clicks. If you think about it, the tile, a mosaic of a visit, you get a few tiles, you just get the full picture.
You're going for the spaghetti wall method and just seeing what sticks.
Well, with AI, you can actually pull signals out. I'll give you a great example. So here's a behavioral heuristic that you can pull out of the data. Something like
heuristic. Thank you.
Fancy word, right? Rage click. We created this concept called a rage click. All of us have done it. You go to a website, you click once, it doesn't do what you thought it would. You click again a little bit faster, and then you just hammer on the mouse.
Yeah. Oh,
that's behavioral data that you can now measure. Did you mouse with intent over that thing that you're really interested in, but you never clicked on it? That's intent. So that's kind of the example of behavioral data.
Okay. So it's so much more than what most people are tracking right now.
It is so much more. This is the future. This is what everybody should be tracking because it's really, it takes the bias out and it gives you true sort of meaningful intent on what your customers are doing. Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they intentful? Are they frustrated? You can get that now.
So it's a different mindset because it used to be, okay, I really want to know add to cart. I really want to know when somebody clicks through colors or sizes or things like that.
Right.
But I mean, building that full behavioral index, where do you start with that?
So we recommend customers just capture all of the data, and then all of the data can be indexed, and then so you have it. So then you can sift through it kind of like in a post-editing process, if you will. And so we do this for lots and lots of customers. And we ran a study recently where we went out and surveyed 2,700 organizations, lots of retailers, travel, hospitality, food and beverage, gambling. So we asked them a bunch of questions, and then we looked in sort of a meta way at some of the patterns across 11 plus billion sessions, 2 billion, almost 3 billion mobile sessions in across 750 billion events to say, all right, what sort of signals can we pull out of this? That's a lot of data. And so we can look at that and kind of say, what's interesting? What might we want to understand?
So, like thinking about respondents, kind of zooming in on respondents right there. So, you mentioned several different silos, several different industries. Is there behavioral insights that are unique to retail or versus hospitality?
Yeah, actually, there are. It's set aside a little bit. Now, we talked about some of the things that we can measure and compare. Like engagement is a general concept that differs.
Sure.
How much active time are people spending on a page here versus there? What about the scroll depth that we're seeing? There's some differences in there. Frustration is something that we can now measure and kind of differentiate. And even, of course, like abandonment. How far does somebody get in a process before they bail out? So when we look at retail, zooming in on retail and pulling out some others, there are some patterns that start to emerge. So let's take that engagement for a second. So we actually see within the retail world less time per session than other industries. There's a little bit less engagement. The details, I don't know if you care or not, but on average, you see about 10 minutes for a visit compared to 10 minutes in retail compared to like 14 minutes for a non-retail visit. And then even within that visit, how engaged are you seeing a retail versus not? They scroll less. And I have some hypothesis why that might be, but who knows? I think it's because people are so good at searching what they want and they come often with intent versus that sort of passive perusal. So you get 14% less scroll depth from an engagement standpoint within retail versus another. And then, let's pivot over to frustration for a second. The flip side.
One of my favorite things. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, aren't we all happy about that? So within the retail sector, we're doing better in frustration than others. So rage clicks, which we talked about earlier, which is sort of a proxy for frustration. We also have a concept we'd call a dead click. A dead click sounds pretty morose, but when you click on something on a page and it doesn't change, often that's something where an interaction isn't wired correctly. And so anyway, for retail, you see much lower frustration as measured by rage clicks and dead clicks and other things.
Do you think it's because they're looking casually, kind of, expendable income kind of thing, where they're, if you're buying a car, if you're buying a washing machine, that is a necessity. If you're buying a new A-line skirt, it's something that is fun to kind of look into a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, honestly, I was just kind of, I was a little bit surprised that the average length of a retail visit was as long as it was. You can figure how many bounces are coming in. And if you're averaging it out to say 10 minutes, that does actually suggest that there is a fair amount of
casual window shopping
process. And it didn't make its way into our behavioral index survey, but we are starting to pay attention to intent as suggested. I mean, if you were to just watch over someone's shoulder as they navigated through a session, you could probably annotate what they were doing. By the way, machine learning is starting to be able to do that. So you can say they were really interested in that set of outdoor furniture. You can just tell versus that because they were mousing over that one. They were pinching and zooming, and that's all behavioral data that you can now get a sense for.
So, I mean, this is 2024. We're on a podcast. If we didn't talk about AI, it'd be ridiculous.
I know.
And so, is that what you're seeing next in the sector, in the AI sector?
Yeah, very much. I mean, so I could pontificate for a long time about this, but go back to the old paradigm of you measure a couple of the click stream, if you will. You measure, you get 6 meaningful clicks that equate to the cart that you care about. If you're collecting all of the behavioral data, well, that's, you kind of said, well, that's too much data for everybody to sift through. Like, what do you do with this mountain of data? Well, we're really good at sifting through a lot of data. Robots are AI is. Yeah. And so you start to get to this place where you just come in and say, just tell me what's important today. And it's done by the equivalent of robots watching sessions and just kind of saying, you know what? All of a sudden, people are really confused on your PDP page in a way that wasn't true a month ago or wasn't true yesterday. Something's gone wrong. And we didn't see any change in the code So there might be a third-party error firing on your credit card processing. Like all of that data is in there. The answers are all in there. The AI is going to sift through and surface what's important.
Well, I mean, I hope more and more AI comes to that, because it's making people more and more efficient. It's making our jobs easier. I'm saying nice things about the computers, so they say nice things about me.
Our new robot overlords. Yes, I say the same thing.
And so, so something happened a few years ago where everybody got real comfortable with online shopping. Yeah. I forget exactly what happened. You know, it was we had to stay inside for some reason. I forget what it was, but with that leap forward, I've heard people say that event actually took us 7 years into the future, basically, when it comes to adoption.
Yeah.
And so do you feel like data management, do you feel like online omni-channel is actually, do you think it's still catching up, or you think there's more work to do there?
I think I view it in a little bit of a different way. As you know, a startup CEO, what we saw was, let's call it from the 19 to 22 timeframe. You can go back and look at the stock market, and it reflects this.
Sure.
COVID hits. I'm going to mention the word, but COVID hits.
It's okay.
The world paused for a moment and then said, okay, we're going digital. We are going digital. And so the amount of R&D dollars that got pushed into developing for digital really has only happened over the past 2 or 3 years. And so what you're seeing now, I think, is the technologies that have been in research and development phase are just now starting to get to the market. And so what you were seeing right in the first inning of COVID was a pull forward of old technology. 2018 technology was like, okay, this is on the shelf. We're going to buy this and we're going to implement this. And because there was such a boost in retail, the venture capitalists went crazy and was like, oh my gosh, this trend line is going to happen forever. What's next? What's next? And they put so much money into it. What's next is today. And I think that a lot of retailers are having a bit of a hangover from the last binge of let's pull that 2018, 2019 technology in.
Right.
But boy, oh boy, the stuff that is happening now, I mean, go back to behavioral data. It's super cool. Couple it with AI. It's really hard to imagine what's going to happen in 18 months. It's hard to predict.
Yeah, even that fast. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, we talked about the pandemic, and we talked about how everything went delivered to the home, and even my mom figured out Grubhub. It was like,
she doesn't like it though. She doesn't like paying for that delivery. She'd rather.
You are correct.
Yeah.
You are correct.
I'm probably her age. That's why.
I doubt it. But so now it's kind of, thankfully, we're seeing a return back to brick and mortar, a return back to that kind of that love of the shopping experience. But we still have our mobile in hand. We still have our iPhone in hand, because it's now truly, I am the omni-channel sitting there going, I wonder if I can get this somewhere else, kind of thing. I wonder if I can, what do the reviews say on this kind of thing?
Yeah, so the data doesn't look as good for mobile. I think we know this as users of mobile. It's still a little spotty, I would guess. There's so much investment in desktop. Now we see a ton of it. We know that 60% of online shopping is done via mobile last year. So really, everybody's there, but that behavioral data is saying that the visits are shorter, right? 3 minutes, 19 seconds compared to 13 minutes for a web session.
Makes sense.
So why? I guess you've got things like Apple Pay, which make that checkout process, which is a big bulk, that goes a lot quicker than it has in the past on native mobile. But we're also seeing more frustration signals in mobile visits than we would see on the desktop. So there are more rage clicks, almost double the amount of rage clicks on a native mobile thing, where rage taps, if you want to call them that way. It's something where I think it's a little bit slower. The frameworks are a little, people keep changing frameworks on how to develop.
You have a variety of platforms, a variety of devices. I mean, keeping up with all that was going to be way more difficult than just doing it on Firefox.
That's right. We'll get there, but we're not there yet. And so we hear from our customers, I'm sure you hear the same thing. It's you want that omni-channel experience. You really want it to be completely the same. Most of the organizations that we talk to, you've got a mobile team and you got a web team, and they're kind of different divisions and they're kind of working on different things, and you're shipping your org chart in some regard.
Yeah. Okay, so with all that omnichannel and everything else like that, how do you bring behavioral analytics into the customer experience?
Yeah, I mean, each organization is on their own journey with this right now. But for starters, you got to pay attention to it. Like if you're still in that paradigm of just measuring the simple click stream, you're probably doing it wrong. It's probably really expensive to get little biased data. And so I think you're probably looking at how can I capture more of this data? And then how can I actually activate that data? And that means you have to create space to not just think about in a baseline funnel, but deal with the behavioral data and have mechanisms in your company to say, look, are we paying attention to frustration? Like, probably not. The only way people are doing it is if a customer support ticket comes in and somebody says, I'm frustrated. So how do I start to create workflows that pay attention to frustration, pay attention to intent, and then activate frustration? You got to fix it fast. Intent, you're running ads in a different way than you have in the past. You know, you're remarketing to people that never actually clicked on something, but are showing with intent that they want that. And I think that's gonna take. We're seeing thought leaders that do this very well. I mean, Amazon's very good at all of these things. Everybody's not Amazon, so we're trying to catch up in that regard.
Absolutely. So I'm kind of excited about the future of it all and everything else like that. But I'm going to ask you a question about the past. We're running up against our timeline real quick. But if you had to go back and start your career again, what advice would you give yourself?
It's a good question. It is listen to the voice that's in your head. I know that sounds crazy because if a voice is talking in your head, you probably get that checked out. But
I listen to all the voices. Yeah.
What I mean by that is, you know, I've been in entrepreneur for a long time, and I've chased some bad ideas, and I've laid awake in the middle of the night with that voice going, this probably isn't that great an idea. But you read blog posts that tell you, you know, the haters are they're not going to get it. And I could have saved some time if I trusted my gut a little bit sooner on some things. Easy to say, hard to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, 100%. Cool. Well, I can't thank you enough, Scott, for being here. If anybody has any questions when it comes to behavioral analytics or what data to gather, we'll have your information all below. But I can't thank you enough for being here, man.
Yeah, man. Happy to do it. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.
If you would like to be featured on our podcast, please email us at podcast@retailcorner.live or visit our website, retailcorner.live. Looking forward to having you as our guest on our podcast, and thank you so much for listening.